This is a 16-inch RCA Victor television set. It's the same kind that my father bought in the late 40s. Now, the first Italian films that I remember seeing were on this little screen. My family around me in pretty much a room like this. Now, I'm American, so when I decided to try and make films, I naturally thought that my place was going to be in Hollywood. I mean, if you're a filmmaker in America, that's where they make the movies. But then, the more films I made, the more I realized what an indelible mark Italian cinema had left on me. So as a filmmaker, I'm kind of caught. I've never really felt like a Hollywood director, or at least what my idea of a Hollywood director is supposed to be. And obviously, I'm not an Italian filmmaker either. So I guess I have to find my home somewhere in between. I suppose it's the only way I'm going to feel comfortable. These days, it seems as if American cinema is all there is, and that all the other cinemas are secondary, including Italian cinema. And that really worries me. In fact, it's the reason I'm making this documentary. The fact is, I know that if I'd never seen the films that I'm going to be talking about here, I'd be a very different person, and of course, a very different filmmaker. I guess I've always linked my movie-going experience with my family. I remember very well my father taking me to the movies and the two of us sharing those remarkable images and those very strong emotions up there on the screen. And they left such an impression on me that today, much of the desire and the need to express myself on film, I think, comes from that experience with my father. My father was a worker. He was a presser in the garment district in New York. But he loved movies, and through movies we were able to communicate, I think. When we watched movies on television, the whole family was often there, including at times my grandparents, my mother and father, and sometimes my brother Frank. And television was very different in those days. There was obviously no cable, no color TV, of course, and certainly no satellites. And there were only a few available channels, like 3 or 4 channels, and these channels were always in desperate need of programming.
Francesco! Francesco! Francesco, I tedeschi, I fascisti! Stanno circondando.
Friday nights were different because there were so many Italian Americans in New York at the time that one station showed Italian movies with subtitles. Now, there weren't that many TV sets in the neighborhood, so friends and, relatives would come over and watch these movies with us. Italy was just coming out of the devastation of World War II, and the films we saw had very powerful, strong images. And some of these images were so moving, so intensely moving, that I noticed that my grandparents started to cry. I mean, they left Sicily in 1909, 1910. They made their way all the way to America, and here they were, seeing on television, in effect, what they had left behind, and what had happened to it, what had become of it. When I looked at their faces, I could see that this was who my grandparents really were. and that this was the country they called home. And it was overwhelming, because for the first time, I became aware that this was where I came from. I saw them suffering with the people in the film. They felt protected here in America, and I could see that they were feeling relief and guilt at the same time. That could have been them up there on the screen.
Feuer!
Io perdona
Feuer!
loro.
Mach Schluss!
My world consisted of our apartment, the church, school a block away, the candy store around the corner. All of a sudden, it became much bigger. My grandparents were Sicilian immigrants who only spoke Sicilian. They never even became American citizens. They could hardly speak or write in English, and they were fairly literate in Italian. My father's family came from Polizzi Generosa, which is in the province of Palermo. And my mother's family came from Cimina, which is also in the province of Palermo. Now, people from these two towns lived across the street from each other, that is, on Elizabeth Street in New York, but they kept at a distance. And this was just one of the many customs sort of carried over from the old world. My grandparents didn't really deal with America. I mean, my parents, their children, used to go to work in the morning as if they were venturing forth into some unknown territory, which just happened to be right around the corner. And then every night, they'd come back home to Elizabeth Street, which is right here. And this is actually the building I'm standing on is the one I grew up in, 253 Elizabeth. Elizabeth Street was Sicily, and every building was a different village. In fact, it was only after a number of years that you saw intermarriage between people from different buildings. So over the years, I've tried to find out as much as I can about my family's history and where we came from. I learned that Polizzi, the town my father came from, was a center for Benedictine monks returning from the Crusades, and that the town was called Generosa by Frederick II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor. And at one point, in my mother's hometown, Cimina, they had as many churches as they had people. Now, these towns lived through the Greeks, then the Phoenicians, the Romans, the Byzantines, Saracens, Normans, French, Spanish, and in this century, the Nazis, and then the Americans. And they survived them all. My grandparents took that history of survival with them when they left Sicily, and they never went back. This is a Sicilian street festival, the Festival of St. Ciro, who's the patron saint of Cimina. Only this isn't Cimina. It's Elizabeth Street in New York. This is movie footage that I saw for the first time only recently. My cousin gave it to me. It was shot 60 years ago by my uncle, his father, before I was born. Seeing these images, everything the world was then, my world, a world that's gone now, came back to me in a flash. This was shot in my grandparents' apartment, my father's parents. And this is really the way I remember it. People always crowding around each other, small rooms, and obviously this is some sort of a special event, must be a wedding or christening or something, I'm not sure. This is my father's mother. Then here's my father's father. And my mother's mother. And actually, this is my father who's playing the mandolin or something. I must say, I don't ever remember him looking like this. I always remember him a little older, heavier, and balding. Here's my father's mother again, and she's in front of the store that they ran back in those days. And here's my father's father. That store I'd heard about for so many years, but this is the first time I'm actually seeing pictures of it. And that woman with the bag of groceries is my mother's mother. She's about to go into her building. That's the building where my mother was born. I never thought I would see any of these people move again. This is the world of my childhood, a world made by people like my grandparents in search of a better life. Now, they never set out to teach me about where I came from, and I never asked. I learned simply from watching them and the movies about their homeland. And so they were the first connection with that ancient land of Sicily. If you're poor in Sicily, and my grandparents and their families were dirt poor, life can be very tough. That's why so many Sicilians came here to America. And the lesson of survival that's been passed down for centuries, that was carried over to the New World, is a pretty brutal one. And that is, you think twice before you trust anybody outside your own family. Think about it. Your country, your homeland changes hands again and again over thousands of years. So who can you trust? The government? The police? The church? No. Only your family. Only your own blood. So it was with my family that I started watching and grew to love Italian cinema. With, of course, a special fondness for films set in Sicily. So as I was growing up, I saw Italian movies any way I could. And usually the prints were pretty bad. Usually scratched and splicey and that sort of thing. Where I saw them on television, where they were dubbed into English, broken up by commercials, and cut for time, of course. But the films had such a powerful effect on me that it really didn't matter. Because over the years, I've seen most of these movies many times, and their impact on me has never weakened. The very first Italian film I remember seeing as a child was on television, and it was Paisan. This was in 1948, which would mean I was about 6 years old at the time. Paisan is made up of 6 episodes that follow the Allied Army, the Americans and the British, as they push their way up the boot of Italy, from south to north, driving the Germans out. And the episodes that had the biggest impact on us as we watched the picture were the ones that were about sacrifice. And these sacrifices were for something that I guess I really didn't understand at the time, at such a young age. They were for freedom. In the Naples episode of Paisan, I saw something that really shocked me. I realized that if my family had never left Italy, I could have been one of those kids up there on the screen, reduced to stealing shoes, selling them on the black market. Even sort of casually buying and selling the right to rob American soldiers. Now, these kids were already so toughened up by war and what came after it that they learned every trick in the book. Like this one, right here. They create a panic to get their soldier, their victim, away from the competition. Now, it's got to be put into a context. I mean, at the time, I was going to see almost every Hollywood picture that opened. I mean, that's what I was used to. And I loved Westerns. The costumes, the scenery. I mean, places as far away from New York as you could get. I especially liked Roy Rogers. I mean, everything about those pictures, those images were very simple. Their stories were very simple. And even though I got caught up in them, I knew they weren't real. In fact, that's why I liked them. They were fantasies. It's amazing to think now and realize that on the same day I might have seen a Roy Rogers picture, I went home and saw Paisan on TV. I mean, Paisan was no fantasy. Especially this Naples episode. Like this scene, where the kid takes the drunken soldier, his name is Joe, into a puppet show to get him out of sight, to hide him from the other kids. But Joe's having a good time, but once he realizes that the crowd is cheering on the story of a white knight beating a Moorish knight, a black knight, it triggers something in him. It's just a little too close to the prejudice he has to live with every day back home. Was this the first movie I ever saw that dealt with racial tension? I'm not sure. But it was definitely one of the first I'd ever seen where the places looked real. They didn't look like sets. And of course, I had no idea that these films were part of an explosion called neorealism, which was shaking up filmgoers all over the world.
I don't want to go home. My home is an old shack with 10 cans for doors. I don't need that key. I don't want to play no more, Paisan. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home.
Joe. Si durul, mi ma rubeșca.
The climax of the Naples episode was the most disturbing thing about it. A few days later, after Joe's sobered up,
Hey, you!
he spots the kid in the street and he wants his shoes back.
You! Would you stole my shoe? Where do you live? Take me to your home. Don't make casa.
Come on, you take me. Get it.
They drive all the way to the outskirts of Naples.
Come on, get out and get my shoes. Come on, get my shoes.
The kid gives Joe any old pair of boots. His own boots, of course, are long gone.
These are not my shoes. Come on, take me to your mother and father. How many shoes do you have?
The boy takes him to the place he now calls home, the cave of Mergellina, where the victims of Allied bombing raids wound up after their homes were destroyed. Now, Joe's seen a lot, but he's never seen anything like this. And neither had I.
Where's your mother and father?
Dekat.
Dove mom and papa?
Mamma e papà non ci stanno più, sono morti. E bombe, boom, boom. Capisci? E bombe, boom, boom.
The emotion of this picture was so strong that you could feel it come through some of the worst prints you've ever seen. Now, this is the way I saw Paisan on TV in 1948. I mean, the print was so dark, you could hardly see what was happening. But despite that, everything essential came through. And in this version, the American release version, the only version I've ever seen, they used a map to introduce each episode. Now, the Sicilian episode is the first one in the movie. And for my family, it was obviously the most important. When it came on, everybody in the room really paid attention.
John.
I remember that the voice of this woman who's yelling in the background had a strong emotional effect on the older people in the room. I mean, it was their dialect. It was the language they spoke.
Yes, America.
The soldiers arrive ready for a fight, but the Germans have just left. Instead, they find the locals.
Mio figlio era licata fino a 10 giorni fa.
Now, when the American soldiers started speaking Italian, his dialect sounded like my uncle's, because he was Sicilian American.
Non abbiate paura, signora. Nessuno li farà male. Ma che cosa
But actually, my uncle spoke better than he did.
Tu parli italiano. Che zitti italiano come hanno oggi?
Sì, mio padre è siciliano. È nato a Gela.
Gela? Io magari sono di Gela. Luca!
Come si chiama?
Sono i Mascali.
Non è di Gela.
Sì, mio padre è veramente di Gela. Poi venne in America.
Non c'hanno stato mascali a Gela. Ito non è di Gela. Beh, non ho capo contro un sacco di storie, buono che ci credete. Fineo la libertà.
E dove hanno messo le mine?
The only one who can lead the Americans past the German mines is a girl named Carmela.
Oh, sei tu che conosci la strada dalla
because she goes out to the rocks every day looking for her father and her brother, who are missing at sea.
2 volte che tento di lasciare la chiesa per cercare a Rigi. Hanno paura di mandare a me sola. Vi ci accompagno. Conosco bene Asciata. Vengo con voi.
Ma figlia, non ci puoi ir sola, questa gente sconosciuta. Non ne va.
After she guides the platoon safely through the minefield, Carmela has to stay behind as a lookout with one of the soldiers who's named Joe.
What, are you scared?
There were a lot of Joes in Paisan. He doesn't speak any Italian.
You a fascist? I'll bet you're a fascist.
And she doesn't speak any English.
Good girl. You're no fascist, really.
She makes sure Joe covers the flame from his cigarette lighter because she knows that the Germans could still be close by.
Come on. We got a couple hours here together. I'm in no mood for an argument. Come on, Carmela, smile. Look. Paisan. Spaghetti. Bambini. Mangiare. Mussolini. Now, how about you? Your English any better than my Italian? Let's try you out. Look, me, Joe. Understand? Joe.
Joe.
Good, good. Move to that of the class. Okay, now try this. Me, Joe, boy. You, Carmela, girl.
Girl.
Fine, fine. You're doing fine. We friends, understand? Friends.
Friend.
Good girl, good girl.
Eventually, they relax.
You know, we've got a garden. My mother grows tomatoes. My sister and I tied a rope on her 2 pear trees to swing on. Here, look.
And they become so relaxed
See? No, she's really much better looking than this.
that Joe lets his guard down.
She's a little like me.
Sorella.
Was ist los? Warum hast du geschossen?
Ich habe ihn nicht gesehen.
Komm, wir gehen.
Doch, habe ich nicht gesehen.
Joe's badly wounded, and Carmela covers the trapdoor right over him to hide him from the Germans.
Hier könnte ich romantisch werden. Hab doch recht gehabt. Das richtige Pirat. Nee, guck mal an, da ist doch jemand. Mensch, was machst du denn hier? Perché scappato al paese?
Avevo paura.
Was ist los?
She tries to distract them. She pretends that she's afraid and she's glad the Germans have come to protect her.
Avere qui appuntamento con fidanzato, eh?
State fermo.
Tuo fidanzato deve essere molto stupido perché non venuto. Ho ragione io, eh?
But when Carmela is finally able to slip away and check on him, her new friend Joe is dead.
Bei uns gibt's keinen. Morgen gibt's einen Gegenangriff und da wird's glauben, wie wir haben. Nicht damit gibt's. Wieder aus.
Sounds like a carbine. Maybe Joe is in trouble.
When the Americans come back, they find Joe's body. And they assume that he was murdered by Carmela.
Wow, that dirty little lot, huh?
They don't know that she's dead too, shot by the Germans and dumped off the side of a cliff. They'll never understand that she sacrificed her life to save theirs. But we do. Now, I also remember seeing another kind of Italian film around this time. Fabiola really captured my imagination. It was was the first Italian epic I ever saw. And apparently it had a very convoluted story.
Take me away. Take me away!
And I think it was made even more confusing by re-editing and dubbing for the American version. Like most epics at the time, Fabiola was about the collision between the Roman Empire and Christianity. But what really struck me was the look of the film. It was very, very different from the American color epics that my father was taking me to see at the time. Fabiola had wonderfully detailed sets, rich pageantry, and magical textures that I just didn't see in American pictures. It's not too difficult to understand why. Italian culture is several thousand years old, whereas in America, we only go back a couple of hundred years. Our mythology is the gunfight at the OK Corral, and theirs, gladiators fighting in the Colosseum. For American craftsmen, this kind of imagery could be a struggle. But for Italy, it comes as naturally as breathing. I also remember seeing another film on television right around the same time. This one was set in the Middle Ages, and it was called The Iron Crown. Now, I was too young to start noticing the names of directors, but many years later I found out that both films were made by the same director, Alessandro Blasetti. Now, the plot of The Iron Crown was even more complicated than Fabiola's. But it really didn't matter, because I could lose myself in this picture. This was a child's dream world, straight out of Italian folklore. And because the sets and the costumes were so beautifully crafted, the dream was very powerful. Paisan was the world as it really was. But the Iron Crown was a world I could escape to. It was alive in a way that the epics I was used to seeing were not. As a child, these two very different kinds of movies felt equally real to me. But the Iron Crown had something else that was quite startling. The potency and terror of a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm.
Sapete come si fa per farli cantare meglio?
Come?
Con uno spillo, stai a vedere.
Che ci fai?
Gli buchiamo gli occhi.
E cantano? Non voglio, non
Ma
voglio!
buono, sentirai quando sono grandi come cantano.
Ma che cuore hai se buchi gli occhi agli uccellini? Cattivo, cattivo brutto! Io non voglio più essere il tuo bambino! Cattivo, va via! Brutto!
No! Cosa vuoi? Sei tu la madre del bambino o è lei? Chiumba.
But it was the ancient world that really captured my imagination back in those days, and especially ancient Rome. This eventually developed into a fascination with the history of the church and early Christianity. So I started collecting comic books that dealt with stories about the Roman Empire. I also collected pictures that I'd cut out of Latin grammar books from school. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to make my own movies, my own epics. So I started to draw storyboards. I mean, I didn't know there were storyboards at the time. It was the only way I could do it. So I made storyboards for some of these imaginary epic films that I had in mind. Years later, I saw some of the early Italian silent films. Now, these were a revelation. This is a scene from Cabiria. It's an epic about Carthage written by the Italian poet Gabriele D'Annunzio. Cabiria was a huge influence on D.W. Griffith and a major inspiration behind his film Intolerance. I was amazed by this movie, by how expressive it was. This was the same kind of shock I felt when I first saw Paisan in Open City, only different. It was as if I'd found a secret door that led right to the heart of the ancient world. Kabiria's powerful images could only have come from a country whose historical imagination stretched back thousands of years. I mean, I had the feeling I was watching a newsreel of ancient Rome. So as a child, I'd already encountered the two extremes in Italian cinema. They were forever linked to my mind: the epic and neorealism. Now, every movie is the product of its own time, but the neorealist movies were much, much more than that. After neorealism, nothing would ever be the same again. By the time the war finally ended in 1945, the Italian movie industry was a shambles. The Germans had confiscated all the film equipment, and they'd converted Cinecittà, the studio, into warehouses. And of course, these were promptly bombed by the Allies. And after the Germans retreated from Rome, the studio became a refugee camp. So Italian filmmakers were sort of on their own, with very, very precious few resources. And the nation of Italy itself needed to be reborn. How did the film industry, which was in a state of complete disarray, come to play such an important part in this rebirth? How did it come to represent an entire people, desperate to redefine themselves after 20 years of fascism and the devastation of war?
Quando attrezza, la campana suona martello, a quelli che hanno gli uomini al largo sulle barche, gli si stringe il cuore.
If you ever have any doubt about the power of movies to effect change in the world, to interact with life and fortify the soul, then study the example of neorealism. So what was neorealism? Was it a genre? Was it a style? Was it a set of rules? Or more than anything else, it was a response to a terrible moment in Italy's history. The neorealists had to communicate to the world everything their country had gone through. They needed to dissolve the barrier between documentary and fiction. And in the process, they permanently changed the rules of movie making. Altogether, these movies amounted to a prayer that the rest of the world look closely at the Italian people and see their essential humanity. That's why they had to be truthful. There was no choice. So neorealism wasn't just a question of making the best of a bad situation, although it was that too. No sets? Use real locations. No money to pay real actors? Use non-actors. And since the people and the places would come right out of the landscape, so would the stories. I mean, in fact, there were sets and actors in many of these films, but what's important is that for the first time, illusion took a back seat to reality. Take this character, for instance. Here's a man who's been out of work for as long as he can remember. And when he finally finds a job, he needs only one thing to hold it down: a bicycle. And on his first day at work, somebody steals it. So throughout the whole film, he spends the next day looking for it, combing the streets of Rome with his son.
Pietro, prendi a zampe e va a Montesacro, aspettami là. Ma che sta a fare? Muoviti!
Desperate times require desperate measures. The neo-realist directors didn't just want to make these films, they had to make these pictures. Beyond everything else, neorealism came to exist out of a moral and a spiritual necessity. The impulse of neorealism to do justice to life as it is, to things as they are, is still with us, even today. I like to think of neorealism as the seed from which a beautiful, solid tree has grown. And the branches on that tree represent virtually all the major Italian filmmakers of the post-war era. For me, it's the most precious moment in film history. Roberto Rossellini, Vittorio De Sica, Luchino Visconti, along with their writers who included Sergio Amidei, Federico Fellini, Suso Cecchi D'Amico, and Cesare Zavattini. They made the films that define neorealism: Open City, Paisan, The Bicycle Thief, La Terra Trema. Now, these films continued to be a source of inspiration for directors from all over the world. In the past, the New Wave in France, Cinema Novo in Brazil, today the new filmmakers in Iran and Taiwan, not to mention many directors over the years in America, especially independent cinema. In a way, you could say that neorealism began with Roberto Rossellini. He was born in Rome in 1906. His father built and owned the first modern movie theater in Rome, the Cinema Corso. And when he was young, he started going to the movies there every day. And of the many films he saw at the Corso, 2 pictures by the American director King Vidor, The Crowd and Hallelujah, they seem to be especially meaningful for him. It's not surprising. They're both great movies, landmarks in fact, and they've been meaningful to many filmmakers, including myself. Rossellini's father died when he was 26, so he was forced to do something he'd never done before: get a job. And that's when he turned to film. He started off doing sound effects, editing, and dubbing. And he was drawn to the documentary form right from the beginning. His first films were short documentaries about animals. Actually, later this proved to be a lifelong interest. His cameraman on some of those films was Mario Bava, who would eventually become a great director of Italian horror films. Now, for me, it's pretty funny because I can't imagine any 2 people more opposite working together. Rossellini got the opportunity to make his first feature in 1940, La Nave Bianca. He made only 3 more films during the fascist period: Un pilota ritorna, L'uomo dalla croce, and Desiderio, which was actually finished by his friend Marcello Pagliero and released after the war. These movies were products of the Italian studio system, all powerful melodramas, but also at the core, very conventional. But during the occupation, Rossellini was already starting to envision a whole new kind of movie. When you're a filmmaker, you gotta get the money first. That's just the reality of the business. So as De Sica once put it, it's not as if Rossellini, Visconti, and myself sat down in the Via Veneto one day and said, hey, let's create neorealism. I mean, it basically started with filmmakers just trying to get their movies made. We're looking for money. We have no money to finish our film. This is what De Sica remembered Rossellini telling him when they ran into each other on the street one day in 1945. What film? De Sica said. Rossellini answered him, it's a story of that priest, Don Morosini, the one who was executed by the fascists. The picture Rossellini was talking about, when it was finally finished, was called Roma, Città Aperta. Here in America, it was called Open City.
Guarda, prete, guarda, sei soddisfatto? Questa è la tua carità cristiana. Questo è il tuo amore per il tuo fratello, né di salvare i tuoi complici. Farai la fine dei traditori. Noi vi distruggeremo tutti, tutti, fino all'ultimo.
Non hai parlato.
If it can be said that neorealism began with one film, it would have to be Open City. Fellini called Rossellini a great father, like Adam, who created us all. With Open City and Paisan, he had as great an influence on the cinema as Griffith or Eisenstein. Everybody seems to agree about that. But apart from those early milestones, his work isn't widely known. And a lot of the people who do know the later films don't appreciate them. Take Voyage to Italy, made in 1953, which is one of my favorites. Now, I first saw it when I was a film student, and I was kind of prepared for it. So my first reaction was immediate and emotional. But over the years, I found that other people didn't always share my feelings about the picture. Like many of Rossellini's films, it's not instantly accessible. But if you give yourself to the film and you spend time with it, you find it can be a rich, moving experience. I think the reality is that Rossellini was one of the few filmmakers who actually became more adventurous as he got older, and that's rare. His work from the 50s, 60s, and 70s is as impassioned as his neorealist films. It's just different. At the age of 60, he made one of his greatest films, The Rise to Power of Louis XIV, and it marked the beginning of a whole new exciting direction. Like Orson Welles with Citizen Kane, Rossellini came to resent Open City, which isn't very surprising when you have to think about it. You're in the middle of your career, and every time you make a new film, it's compared and measured against something you did way back at the beginning, and your new work comes up short. This can be very, very frustrating, even infuriating. But of course, that doesn't change the fact that Open City is a one-of-a-kind film, where history and cinema met to create something uniquely powerful. Open City became a worldwide success, a phenomenon, really. But it started slowly. First it caught on in France, then in America, and only then in Italy. At the time, Life magazine wrote that the film helped Italy to regain that nobility it had lost under Mussolini. It's not the kind of thing you usually read about a movie. So in a way, Open City became the new Italy's ambassador to the world. It's a film about ordinary people. A priest, a pregnant woman, a group of communist resistance fighters, a few kids, who all become heroes under extraordinary circumstances. It's also a film about occupation and its price, whereas Paisan is a film about liberation and its price. Some critics and historians consider Paisan's final episode, set in the Po Valley, to be the purest form of neorealism. Stripped of all dramatic artifice, things simply happen. And we're drawn further and further into the hopeless situation of some truly courageous people. Fellini, who was one of the assistants on Paisan, said that Rossellini didn't want to be tied to a script. He was in search of something that he could only get by leaving himself open to every possibility.
Altro partigiano morto. La vaga già pare?
You want to be careful of that German tower down there, Tedeschi.
Non mi interessa, io vado lo stesso.
All right, I'll go over on the beach and explode that mine.
Some partisans and American and English soldiers are completely cut off in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by Germans. They find out that they won't be getting any support from the Allies.
What have you heard from 15th Army headquarters?
General Alexander's headquarters have confirmed the message to cease all operations and for all partisans to return immediately to their homes.
There's another partisan in the poll.
These people aren't fighting for the British Empire, they're fighting for their lives.
What else did headquarters have to say?
I told them we were completely cut off and that from one moment to the other.
Well, what the devil do they expect us to do? Have you told them we have no ammunition, no food, and no possible means of defense?
I told them our entire situation. Their answer is still cease all activity.
What do they expect us to do? We're entirely surrounded by Germans.
They get so hungry that they're forced out into the open.
Ciao, le qua Cigolani.
Oh, avanti, Cigolani. Buonasera, ragazzi. Che novità che?
Ieri tutti tedeschi è venuti fin qua.
Lascia che cerca, mi vengo pure nessuno. Padre, lo sapevi che mi con gli americani nascosti?
Sì, sì.
Le 3 giorni che non posso attaccare il fuoco perché i tedeschi vedono il fumo.
I gavedette dappertutto.
E fuori ci danno la caccia forte. Avresti niente da darmi da mangiare?
Quel che avevamo, un poca de polenta.
Potremmo cucinare dopo i sappi?
Sì, beh, no, vedo fuori uno, un bravo ragazzo, un americano. Forse chiamalo,
Ciamelo.
You got a lot of mosquito bites there, youngster. I have something for that.
The American soldier finds a way of repaying the family for their kindness.
Still a faccia. Want to be careful with it, though. Nascandre.
The family prepares a meal for the men. Polenta and eels. Seems pretty simple. Fishing for the eels, picking them out, and then killing one. right in full view of the camera. Just an act of everyday brutality. And it's also a way of preparing us for what's about to happen.
Casa Maddalena. Ti snavi accorto che siamo stati? Damn, the Jerry's figured we were there. Alle baracche, occhi aperti, mi raccomando.
This family has been compromised by their own hospitality.
Ellen, come with me.
And the Germans slaughter them. Fellini said that Rossellini seemed to know exactly what he wanted during the shooting of this episode. He was driven to find a new way of telling a story on film, where nothing is artistically embellished or enhanced, where everything seems to be simply unfolding as in life. For me, this clarity of vision was an almost religious impact. As the French film critic André Bazin said, Rossellini was simply directing the facts. The Germans win the skirmish, then they separate the Allied soldiers from the partisans. They treat the partisans as ordinary traitors, unworthy of the respect given to real prisoners of war.
What are you going to do with these partisans you got tied up like animals out here?
No international law protects the partisans. They are not considered soldiers. They are just outlaws.
What about the two San Marco men? They're from the regular Italian army.
No, we don't recognize Badoglio's government.
What are you going to do with them?
I'm expecting orders of my headquarters. A casa mia non sapranno mai quello che mi è capitato.
Ho pissato addosso come un puttino.
Questo accadeva nell'inverno del 1944. All'inizio della primavera la guerra era finita.
Questo film, girato a Berlino nell'estate del 1947, non vuole essere che un quadro obiettivo e fedele di questa immensa città semidistrutta, in cui 3,5 milioni di persone trascinano un'esistenza spaventosa.
In 1947, Rossellini went to Berlin to make a film called Germany Year Zero, the last third of what became his post-war trilogy. It's about a young boy named Edmund who's trying to grow up in a world that's been completely decimated by war. Edmund has nothing, and nothing to look forward to. In this world of corruption and never-ending horror, the only rule is survival. All the conflicting forces around him drive Edmund to do something unthinkable. Kill his own ailing father, who's lost the will to go on. In his mind, it's an act of mercy. And once he's done it, there's nothing left for him but despair. Compared to the earlier films, Germany Year Zero feels a little detached. But I think that Rossellini needed to stay detached because he's presenting us with a truly terrible reality here. Try to imagine what it was like in Germany after the war, after their entire culture had self-destructed. What would it be like to be an innocent, in a guilty world. For me, Germany Year Zero is a film of real compassion. Edmund's death is a lonely sacrifice, just like Carmilla's. In fact, sacrifice is what links the three films in the trilogy. I think that Rossellini was pleading with the nations of post-war Europe to find some sympathy and tolerance for their former enemy, so that they could all go on together. And I don't think anyone else had the courage to make a movie like this in 1947. Rossellini followed Germany Year Zero with something different, a sort of tale called The Miracle. Federico Fellini wrote the story, and this is Fellini himself right here, playing a drifter. The Miracle is a vehicle for Anna Magnani. In fact, it's unthinkable without her. She plays a shepherdess, a woman of limited intelligence but infinite faith.
Oh Gesù, Giuseppe Maria. Ma perché te ne vai? Non te ne andare, no. Ti posso parlare, sì. Dio, che consolazione. Bello, bello, santo mio, bello, che felicità, che gioia. Tu mi fai morire, e è fatta. E mi porti con te lassù in paradiso, nella contemplazione del Signore.
The Miracle is about the question of faith, and it's a running theme in Rossellini's work at this time. I think he was trying to ask the question, how can faith survive World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust?
Tu sei passato per il paese, eh? E non t'hanno visto. Certo, non sono degni. Non sono degni, invece io. Sai che mi dicono sempre, i matti non possono entrare in paradiso. A me.
She's convinced herself that he's St. Joseph.
Vedi se Gesù.
But he's no saint. And he makes the most of the situation.
Che paradiso. Che paradiso in terra.
Amata ha ricevuto la grazia.
Io sto male. Sto male.
She's slow to realize what's actually happened to her.
Ma tu sai che stai in giro?
Once she does, she believes that she's going to give birth to the baby Jesus. The homeless people she stays with throw her out. The people in town have absolutely no sympathy for her whatsoever. To them, she's just a fool. Everybody has a good laugh over the miracle that's about to happen. But then, there really is a miracle. A child is born. The miracle is life. The Miracle seems like such a simple film, but it's very special because, without calling attention to it, Rossellini's communicating something very elemental about the nature of sin. It's a part of who we are, and it can never be eliminated. For him, Christianity is meaningless if it can't accept sin and allow for redemption. He tried to show us that this woman's sin, like her madness, is nothing in comparison to her humanity. It's odd to remember that this film was the cause of one of the greatest scandals in American movie history. When The Miracle opened at the Paris Theater in Manhattan, Cardinal Spellman, who was the Cardinal of New York at the time, and the Legion of Decency, that was the Catholic watchdog organization, called the movie a blasphemous parody, and they mounted a campaign to have it pulled from the theaters. Joseph Burston, the film's U.S. distributor, took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. And on May 26, 1952, the court decided in his favor. They held that movies were entitled to the same freedom of speech as the press, and they completely struck down the idea of blasphemy as grounds for censorship. Now, I've run into plenty of my own problems with censorship, so I know from personal experience what a landmark decision this was. The miracle caused a scandal, but it was nothing compared to what happened a year later with Rossellini and his star Ingrid Bergman had an affair and then a child out of wedlock. Now, today it doesn't seem like a very big thing, but it was back then. They were condemned throughout America, and not just by the church this time. They were actually condemned on the floor of the American Senate. Application to Argentina has been denied. Italy won't take her, so she has no place to go.
And your occupation?
None.
One of the Italian POWs, who's a Sicilian fisherman, he gives her a way out. But then, her husband goes out to sea with the other fishermen. And one day, she wanders down to the shore, a man comes by, and he shows her how they look for fish. She becomes so desperate that she'll do... You're slowly drawn into what is really the core of existence for these people. The praying. The waiting. When the volcano threatens to erupt, the islanders go out in their boats and wait it out. For them, this is normal. But for Karen, she's reached her limit, and she can't take it anymore. And then, Rossellini made a film about having faith, the embracing of faith. With Fellini, he adapted Flowers of St. Francis, a book that was written in the 14th century. In the aftermath of the world tragedy, St. Francis's example of unconditional love for every living thing had a sense of real urgency. I'd never seen the life of a saint treated on film with so little solemnity and so much warmth.
Ma cosa vuoi, fratello?
Quanto sei bello.
Che cosa vuoi?
Voglio parlare col capo.
Parla con me, la stessa cosa.
Voglio restare con Francesco.
E di questo bue che cosa vuoi farne?
Lo voglio dare ai fratelli.
Ma... Il nonno è impazzito! Lui è un vecchio rimpiazzito! La vacca è nostra!
Abbiamo bisogno, non possiamo regalare una vacca!
Per noi non ne abbiamo bisogno. Di lui mi prendo cura io, andate.
Sì, tenete dritte!
Ma tu stando in mezzo a noi dover lavorare più di prima.
Sì, voglio
I tuoi
lavorare.
parenti dovranno essere come morti.
Morto.
E stare in mezzo agli umili per predicare, lavorare.
Predicare, lavorare, dire tutto, cosa.
Ma non ti è sembrato duro lasciare i tuoi familiari?
Tutto.
Ma che cosa vuoi da Francesco?
Voglio fare santo come Francesco.
Ma sono io, Francesco.
Oh, Francesco!
Eccoli, giungono! Andiamo.
Flowers of St. Francis was shot in early 1950 in the mountains around Rome.
Ecco, abbiamo un nuovo fratello.
E come si chiama? Giovanni.
Giovanni si chiama.
And Rossellini used real monks to play all the principal roles. The film consists of a series of episodes in the lives of St. Francis and his fellow brothers.
Che ti è successo? Poverino, tutto infreddolito.
And these episodes play like little